I'm Şebnem Kalemli-Ozcam, and this work is joined with Cem Çakmaklı, Selva, Demiralp, Sevcan, Yeşiltaş, and Muhammed, Yıldırım from Koç University. And in the paper, we make the economic case for global vaccinations. As we all know, COVID-19 has caused catastrophe across the world, sparing no country in 2020. Now we have the vaccines. These are seen as a game changer, and they can stop the pandemic, of course, in a given country. The point we would like to make in this paper is that given the global interconnections between countries, even you achieve universal inoculation in your own country, you are still going to suffer economically if the rest of the world is not vaccinated. And the paper is about estimating these costs by focusing on three questions. First, what is the economic impact of not vaccinating poorer nations on the richer nations? And then how much of the global economic cost the rich nations bear, even if they achieve universal vaccination in their own countries? And then finally, the third question is which sectors in rich economies are especially vulnerable? So our framework is a data-driven framework, and it is very rich in country sector heterogeneity. We would like to bring the sectoral heterogeneity in infection dynamics together with the sectoral heterogeneity in global trade and production networks. And the way we do that is by combining an epidemiological model, a SIR model, susceptible, infected, recovered model, with an economic framework that uses the global trade and production network data. So basically, how do we do this? On the supply side, we model the domestic labor supply shock as a function of infections that allow us to capture this heterogeneity where if you are a worker in an occupation that you have to be on site, you cannot remote work, and you have to work in close proximity to others, then your infection rate is going to be higher. We combine this labor supply with domestic and imported intermediate inputs in a Leontief production function structure based on the evidence of strong complementarities in the short run. So our estimates are going to be very short run in 2021. So on the demand side, we follow a similar approach and we make consumption expenditure as also a function of infections through our SIR model. And these SIR model that gives us the infection dynamics is country specific. We start end of 2020 country specific R numbers, and we let the pandemic evolve in every country in 2021. So we are going to have cases where if severe cases are more than the ICU capacity of a country, then that country is going to put a lockdown. And we let the demand normalize only when the cases are very low. And these things are going to be calibrated based on what we observed in 2020 in real-time data. The open economy dimension, of course, very straightforward because the infection dynamics affect production in each country and demand in each country. That's going to feed directly in exports and imports of both final and intermediate goods. So to measure all this, we are going to use very rich data on global trade and production networks. This is OECD ICIO tables. Just to give you a glimpse of the complexity of this network, on the left here in blue, I plotted the trade relationship between countries, both for final and intermediate goods. Different colors and different arrows represent the strength of those relationships. And on the right, in the pink, orange, red color, I show you the same complex network for sectors. So you can see that this is a sectoral input-output linkages, but this is going to be embedded on the figure on the left. So it is a hugely complex network of 65 countries and 35 industries that we will be working with that is covering the entire global trade and production network. And the color coding here is again, is about certain sectors can be very linked to other country sectors because these are tradable. These are the sectors buying a lot of input from other countries, but you can also be a light pink sector who don't do that much that directly, but you can do that indirectly through another sector. So we will use these full-fledged I-O linkages at the local and global level. Then we are going to ask a very simple question. Given this rich, complex local and global trade and production network, how much amplification we can get when there's the health shock in a given country affecting that country's demand and that country's production, how much this amplification can be given these I-O linkages. So we are going to work three specifications here. Every specification is going to allow a demand shock, both domestic and foreign, as a function of infections. So it goes from the best case to worst case scenarios from specification 1 to 3. The difference is in the first specification, we are not going to allow the full brunt of these global value chains. So there won't be any shock coming to you through your imported intermediate inputs. So in the first specification, you will only suffer if your own workers are sick. But in the second and third specification, you will also suffer if workers are sick in certain sectors affecting other sectors domestically. So amplification via domestic input-output linkages. And in the final, most general specification, we let the amplification through the entire international and inter-industry input-output linkages. So you buy inputs from a sector in another country, and that other country is not vaccinated, but that is still going to affect you, your own sector, even you achieve full vaccination. So vaccination enters to this scenario exactly like that by eliminating the labor supply shock in the country of vaccination and also normalizing the demand in that country. So here are all the costs for advanced economies and emerging market and developing economies, both in terms of billions on the top panel and in terms of percent of GDP, pre-pandemic GDP in the bottom panel. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but I would like to make the case that each of these specifications going from least effect to most effect for a vaccinated country can be analyzed under 3 different scenarios given in these 3 blocks. So the first 2 blocks are going to be about scenarios where advanced economies achieve full vaccination right away at the beginning of 2021, and emerging market and developed economies get no vaccination whatsoever, and they might have no lockdowns or endogenous lockdowns in their own countries. And the final block here, which I'm going to focus on, is our benchmark scenario. We think this is more realistic, where advanced economies achieve full vaccination of their citizens by the mid-2021, and emerging market and developed economies only be able to vaccinate half of their population by early 2022. And because pandemic gets really worse there, they are going to have endogenous lockdown. So if I have to focus on 2 numbers here, this is the share of advanced economies in terms of how much burden they have to shoulder in terms of global total economic cost. That's 49.3%. So the economic cost in the world is around 4 trillion, and 49.3% is going to be borne by advanced economies under this scenario, even they achieve full vaccination by mid-year. And if they are not affected through this amplification of imported intermediate inputs, and they only lose export revenue, so say they vaccinate themselves, advanced economies, but the rest of the world is in recession because they are still sick. And even in that case, advanced economies is going to share the 21% of the total global economic cost. And these numbers are not that small, right? They are actually from 1% of advanced economy pre-pandemic GDP to almost 3%, 2.72% of pre-pandemic GDP. So the final figure I would like to show you is about the importance of the global trade and production network in terms of sectoral heterogeneity in GDP loss. So what I plot here on the left is the 1-digit sector GDP loss plotted as a box plot to show you the country heterogeneity for the vaccinated advanced economy group. And the sectors are color coded, where blue are tradable sectors and pink are non-tradable sectors. And on the right, I plot the same sectoral GDP loss for unvaccinated emerging market and developing economies. So the ranking here is a very typical one that now we are used to see in 2020, where the bottom sectors here in the unvaccinated countries, the highest loss sectors are your services sectors, right? Your restaurants are closed, your gyms are closed, so accommodation and food services, arts and entertainment, these are the highest loss sectors in an unvaccinated country, where I plot here with a vertical black line the maximum loss in advanced economies in these services sectors. It is very small now, right? Why? If you go to the left again, because vaccinated advanced economies don't suffer these losses in the services sectors anymore. In fact, now they only suffer because of tradable sectors, and the maximum loss for advanced economies is going to be in the tradable sectors shown here with the blue in agriculture and fishing. But it doesn't mean that that's going to be the only thing. In fact, you can see that transport and storage and wholesale retail, 2 non-tradable sectors here, still a lot of losses, right? More than 15% of GDP. And to give 2 examples, US denoted with blue diamond and Netherlands denoted with orange triangle, The tradable sector loss, of course, is going to be correlated with openness. Netherlands is a more open country, so suffer more than US, but US is still suffering in these non-tradable sectors shown with the blue diamond. Why? Because these sectors either directly import intermediate inputs, or they are linked to other domestic sectors that imports intermediate inputs from unvaccinated emerging market and developed economies. So this can have a true amplification effect on vaccinated advanced economies in terms of GDP loss. So basically what we do in the paper is to demonstrate the economic case for global vaccination, as so far the debate had to be about the morality of this. And our results is going to rely on this fact that no economy is an island in this complex globalized world where countries are tied to each other with international linkages. In this world, the potential loss to advanced economies GDP, even they themselves achieve universal vaccination, can be larger than the investment needed in global vaccination initiatives such as COVAX. And we calculate the return to this investment that tells you that such investment can be in the best interest of advanced economies in terms of the return they are going to get, because this is compared to the losses that they might suffer in 2021 when the pandemic is not under control in their unvaccinated trading partners. So our bottom line is that given the extent of globalization, no economy fully recovers until every economy recovers. And that means if we want to solve the pandemic, we must adopt a multilateral approach.